Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Budget Magic. So, as you know, Modern Masters 2017 is right around the corner, and this week we are heading to Modern to play a deck that is kind of enabled by Modern Masters 2017 reprints. This is Mono White Humans for Modern. I talked about this a little bit on our Brewers Minute last week. I've been trying to make this deck work for a while, but the price of Path to Exile being like $50 a playset was just too much to get it under budget and make it work. But now, with Path to Exile being like $30 a playset, it's actually possible that we can make this really aggressive, really powerful Mono White Humans list and have it function because we get the best removal spell in the format. So, a quick warning before we get to the deck. When I was recording these videos last week, I was kind of a bit sickish, so if I sound funny, it's because I was a little congested, but the show must go on, and I didn't want to just skip Budget Magic, so I got it done, and the matches turned out pretty sweet, but if I sound funny, that's what's going on. I was a little sick last week. Anyway, a quick reminder before we break down the deck. If you enjoy Budget Magic and the other series here on the channel, it would be amazing of you if you could take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk Mono White Humans, and the reason to play this deck, as far as creatures are concerned, are Champion of the Parish and Thalia's Lieutenant. So these are the cards that make this deck super powerful, super aggressive. Champion of the Parish is often attacking for 3 damage on turn 1, because we can play it on turn 1, play a couple more humans, and then we're just beating down with this huge 1-drop, and then it keeps growing throughout the game. It's not impossible or uncommon for it to be 5-5 or 6-6 as the game continues, and be the biggest thing on the board, where it's attacking through Tarmogoyfs and Thought-Knot Seers and all that stuff. Thalia's Lieutenant, on the other hand, is kind of a Champion of the Parish in its own right, getting bigger every time a human enters the battlefield. Plus, it gives up the cheapness of Champion of the Parish being 2 mana instead of 1, but it gains the ability to Anthem our entire team when it enters the battlefield, because all of our stuff are humans. So sometimes we just play this on turn 2, get an extra counter on our champion or whatever, start growing our Thalia's Lieutenant as we play stuff afterwards. Other times we hold off to like turn 3 and play 1-drop on turn 1, 2 1-drops on turn 2, Thalia's Lieutenant, make all of our 1-drops huge, beat our opponent down, because our deck is super cheap. That's kind of the whole idea of this deck. We don't have any cards that cost more than 2 mana, so we play very few lands, all very cheap, efficient things, and just try to close out the game quickly before our opponent can recover. As far as our 1-drops, it is Savannah Lions City. We have 4 Elite Vanguards, a literal Savannah Lions, a vanilla 2-1 for 1 white mana. It is a human though, so that's the upside. It triggers our Champion of the Parish, it triggers our Thalia's Lieutenant, it gets a counter from our Thalia's Lieutenant, all that stuff. Mardu Woe Reaper is a Savannah Lions with a slight upside. In a lot of matchups it doesn't really matter, but in some matchups, exiling a creature from our opponent's graveyard, like against Dredge or even against Eternal Witness, Court of Calling decks, is actually pretty relevant. Plus, it gains us some incidental life, which can kind of matter in an aggro matchup if we're against Burn or something. Every little bit of life helps. And then Soldier of the Pantheon is actually very similar to Mardu Woe Reaper. It sometimes gains us a little extra life. It dodges some random removal. You can't Abrupt Decay it, can't Lightning Helix it. Occasionally, it'll block a Grimflayer or something, a multicolor creature like that, a Kitchen Finks. So there is some upside with the protection from multicolor, but in a lot of matchups that doesn't come up either. So really, when it comes down to it, the main reason we're playing all these cards is they're Savannah Lions. They are 2 powered attackers we can play on turn 1. They get bigger from our Thalia's Lieutenants and our other cards, and they're all humans, so they fit the plan of the deck. In the 2-drop slot, we have some really important options. Thalia Garden of Thraben is key to the deck for a couple of reasons. Most importantly, it helps us survive sweepers by making them cost 1 more mana, while a turn 3 Anger of the Gods is going to be devastating almost all the time. By turn 4, Anger of the Gods isn't as scary. Like, it still can be good sometimes, but we often can have our opponent dead or essentially dead by that point, and if our opponent's tapping out, then we can just refill the board, and it also stops like targeted removal removal, it doesn't stop it, but it slows it down. When our opponent has to spend 2 mana to Fatal Push something or Lightning Bolt something, it's just so much less efficient that we can use that tempo advantage to our advantage and hopefully make our opponent play just a little bit less efficiently and use that to be able to close out the game before our opponent can stabilize, because that's what this deck is all about, getting our opponent dead before they can stabilize. Almost every deck we play against is going to have more long game power than our deck, more expensive, big things that can dominate the board, so we got to get in early and take advantage of that aspect of our deck. The other thing Thalia does is gives us a shot against spell-based combo decks. Like, this deck just likely wouldn't be fast enough to consistently be like the Brawl Storm deck, for example. However, if we play Thalia, we are suddenly very favored to beat the Storm deck. It can just flip bad matchups to good matchups all by itself. That's how powerful that effect is in certain matchups. Imposing Sovereign is like a Thalia for creatures. It doesn't really stop creatures, but it slows them down by a turn. So if our opponent's plan is to play big blockers to stop our humans, that plan doesn't work very well. Like, if our opponent's going to turn 3 Lingering Souls to do some chump blocking, those tokens are going to enter tapped, which means we get in another big attack, get in a bunch more damage, so it's actually way better than it looks. Gather the Townsfolk is like card 59 and 60 in our deck. Definitely consider this a flex slot. I like some of the upside of Gather the Townsfolk. The benefit of Gather the Townsfolk is it's great with Champion of the Parish. All by itself, it makes Champion a 3/3 on turn 2, which is great. It also works well with Thalia's Lieutenant, both pumping Thalia's Lieutenant twice, like it does Champion of the Parish. Also good before Thalia's Lieutenant, because it gives us 2 human bodies to get 2 +1/+1 counters from the Thalia's Lieutenant. On the other hand, just having 1/1s isn't that exciting in Modern. It doesn't work well with Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, because it makes our Gather the Townsfolk more expensive. So you could definitely experiment with this slot. Try Handweir Militia Captains or whatever human you want to play in this slot. But I think Gather the Townsfolk is good enough that it's fine in the deck. As far as the non-creature spells, Honor of the Peers back up Thalia's Lieutenant, pumping our entire team for 2 mana, so it's very good. It's often adding 3 to 5 power to the board, because we have multiple creatures out when it comes down, it immediately boosts the power, gets in a bunch of extra damage. Brave the Elements is maybe the best card in our deck. It's so good. It fizzles Pyroclasm, Anger of the Gods, fizzles targeted removal if we need it to. Plus, it often makes our entire team unblockable, where we can just play this for 1 mana, choose protection from whatever color of blockers our opponent has, swing in, and just close out the game with 1 big Alpha Strike. And then Path to Exile. We talked about this in the beginning. It's just so important to these white aggro strategies. So good. Gets a blocker out of the way. The thing is with Path, there's just not a good substitute. Like, the next in line, I think, when I did the ultra budget version of this deck, was Journey to Nowhere, and Path is 100 times better than Journey in this deck. It allows us to play a Champion of the Parish on turn 1, on turn 2, Path our opponent's Grim Logmancer, Dark Confidant, whatever, and play another 1-drop to keep building our board, so it's just very, very good in the deck. Mana base wise, pretty simple. 19 planes, not much to say here. In the sideboard, we get Gutshots, Dismembers, and Disenchants as additional removal. Gutshot, good against certain decks. It might be less good now that Gitaxian Probe is gone and people aren't playing Infect as much as they were. Dismember gets rid of pretty much anything. Disenchant for artifacts and enchantments. Tormod's Crypt for graveyards. Aegeus of the God is actually kind of helpful against burn. Kind of an answer to some combo decks as well, like Ad Nauseam, that are looking to kill us by targeting us with spells. Repel the Abominable also kind of does that. That prevents all damage that non-human sources would deal, so not even creatures. So this does fizzle a burn spell to the face. It fizzles a Ad Nauseam finisher to the face. It actually stops a whole bunch of things. Conflagrate from Dredge. So it's a really tricky card that allows us to steal wins. Also just saves our humans from Anger of the Gods like Brave the Elements would. And that is mono white humans for Modern, and that's our budget Magic deck for this week. So I think this deck is actually pretty sweet. If you like aggressive decks, you like tribal based strategies, I think you'll really like this deck. It felt really powerful. Of course, as you will see in our match, matches. There are some cards that are just extremely hateful, and we're not going to beat them. Engineered Explosives is very good against our deck. Chalice of the Void on 1 is very good against our deck. So when we run into those decks and those cards, we can struggle, but when it comes to just playing a somewhat fair game of Magic, this deck is very aggressive, gets out of control pretty quickly, and it seems like it has a power level that can fight against a lot of the tier decks in the format when we dodge the cards that are specifically hateful to our deck, like the Chalices, like the Engineered Explosives. Anyway, that's our Mono White Humans deck for Budget Magic this week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the gameplay videos, and I will talk to you soon.